Jake Morrison stood in the corner of the briefing room, watching the alien crew members talk among themselves. They spoke in their own languages, making strange clicking sounds and deep rumbles that hurt his ears. Sometimes they would look at him and shake their heads. He knew they were talking about him again. The research ship Horizon's Edge was huge, bigger than any building Jake had ever seen back on Earth. It had taken him 3 months to learn his way around without getting lost. The alien crew members moved through the halls like they owned the place, which they basically did. Jake was the only human on board. Everyone made sure he knew it. Commander Zefter walked into the room, and all the talking stopped. The Saurian was 8 feet tall with green scales that looked like armor. His yellow eyes could see things that human eyes could not. When he looked at Jake, his mouth would curl up in what Jake thought might be a smile, but not a nice one. "Today we talk about our next mission," Commander Zefter said in his deep voice. The translator in Jake's ear turned the alien words into English, but it always sounded wrong somehow. "We are going to Zarian Prime." Dr. Velanira made a sound like breaking glass. She was made of some kind of crystal that changed colors when she was excited or scared. Right now, she was flashing bright blue. "That planet is very dangerous," she said. "The creatures there have killed many research teams." Jake had read about Zarian Prime in the ship's computer files. It was a jungle world with strange plants and animals that could do things Earth's animals could not do. Some of them could turn invisible or shoot electricity from their bodies. The planet was marked as high risk in all the Coalition files. Chief Security Officer Kralmoth stepped forward. He looked like a giant bug with thick armor covering his whole body.
Gus.
His 4 arms each held a different weapon, and Jake had seen him practice with all of them. "My soldiers are ready," Kralmoth said. "We have the best weapons and armor in the Coalition fleet." "Good," said Commander Zefter. "But we are not going there to fight. We are going to study the apex predator of that world, the Void Stalker." The room got very quiet. Jake had heard stories about Void Stalkers in the ship's mess hall. The other crew members would talk about them in whispers, like saying the name too loud might make one appear. They were supposed to be 12 feet tall, with claws that could cut through metal. Nobody had ever caught one alive. Most people who saw one did not live to tell about it. "The Coalition Science Council wants us to bring back data," the commander continued. "Pictures, videos, maybe even a live specimen if we can manage it. This will make our careers if we succeed." Dr. Velanira flashed orange, which Jake had learned meant she was worried. "The electromagnetic interference on that planet makes our sensors almost useless. How will we even find these creatures? We have the best technology in the galaxy." Commander Zefter said, "Our shields can stop anything those animals can throw at us. Our weapons can kill anything that moves. We just need to be smart about it." Jake raised his hand slowly. The alien crew members turned to look at him, and he felt his face get hot. "Maybe I could help with the behavioral analysis," he said. "I studied animal behavior back on Earth. I know how predators think and act." The silence that followed was worse than if they had all started yelling at him. Commander Zefter's yellow eyes looked Jake up and down, taking in his small human frame.
"Oh."
Jake was only 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed less than most of the equipment on the ship. Next to these aliens, he looked like a child. Then Commander Zefter started laughing. It was a sound like rocks grinding together. "The human thinks he can help us understand the most dangerous predator in known space," he said to the others. "This creature that has killed trained Saurian warriors and hive soldiers with decades of combat experience." Dr. Velanira flashed yellow, which meant she found something amusing. "Jake Morrison," she said, "your species has an average bone density of 1.85 grams per cubic centimeter. A Void Stalker's bite force has been measured at over 40,000 pounds per square inch. You would be crushed before you could even see it move." Kralmoth clicked his mandibles together, which was how his species laughed. "On my home world, we use creatures smaller than humans as food for our pets," he said. "What could you possibly know about apex predators that we do not?" Jake felt his hand shake a little, but he kept his voice steady. "Humans have lived with dangerous predators for millions of years. We learned how to survive by being smart, not strong. We study their patterns, find their weak spots, use tools and teamwork. Tools, Commander Zefter repeated, like the word. Tasted bad. Humo tools are sticks and rocks compared to our plasma weapons and energy shields. Your teamwork means hiding behind others who are stronger than you. The other aliens made their laughing sounds again. Jake's face got hotter, but he tried one more time. I'm not saying humans are stronger. I'm saying we think differently. Sometimes a different way of looking at a problem can help. The problem, said Dr. Velanira, is that you would not survive long enough to look at anything, the average human. Running speed is 15 miles per hour. A Void Stalker can move at 60 miles per hour through dense jungle. The math is quite simple. Commander Zefter waved his hand to end the discussion. The human will come with us because the Earth's coalition treaty requires it. But he will stay in the camp while the real scientists do the work. We cannot afford to waste time protecting someone who cannot protect himself. Jake wanted to argue more, but he could see it would not help. These aliens had made up their minds about humans a long time ago. They saw his species as weak and useless, good only for doing simple jobs that did not require strength or courage.
Ow.
It did not matter that Jake had degrees in biology and animal behavior. It did not matter that he had spent years studying the most dangerous predators on Earth. All they could see was his small human body. The briefing continued for another hour, but nobody asked Jake for his opinion again. The aliens talked about their weapons and sensors and battle plans. They discussed the best ways to track and capture a Void Stalker using their advanced technology. They were confident that their superior strength and equipment would make the mission easy. As the meeting ended, Jake gathered his notes and prepared to leave. Commander Zefter stopped him at the door. Human, he said, I want you to understand something. Zarian Prime is not like your safe little Earth. The creatures there have evolved to kill anything that moves. Stay close to the camp when we land. Do exactly what you were told. Try not to get in the way. I understand, Jake said quietly. Hope you do, the commander replied. Because if you wander off and get yourself killed, it will be extra paperwork for me. Jake left the briefing room feeling smaller than ever. The hallways of the ship seemed longer and emptier as he walked back to his quarters. Other crew members passed him without speaking, their alien faces showing nothing but indifference or mild contempt. In his small room, Jake sat on his narrow bed and looked at the pictures on his wall. They showed Earth animals he had studied. Lions, wolves, bears, sharks. Each one was a perfect killing machine in its own way, but humans had learned to live alongside all of them. His ancestors had faced down creatures just as dangerous as anything on Zarian Prime. Armed with nothing but their brains and their refusal to give up, Jake pulled out his personal tablet and started reviewing everything he could find about Void Stalkers. The files were incomplete, but there were patterns in the few eyewitness accounts that had survived. Patterns that the aliens had missed because they were too busy thinking about weapons and armor. Maybe Commander Zefter was right. Maybe Jake would just get in the way. But deep down, he had a feeling that this mission was going to be different from what any of them expected. And when that moment came, his human way of thinking might be exactly what they needed to survive. The horizon's edge dropped out of hyperspace with a sound like thunder rolling through the ship's hull. Jake felt his stomach lurch as the artificial gravity adjusted to the new conditions. Through the small window in his quarters, he could see Zarian Prime hanging in space like a dark red jewel. The planet looked angry from orbit. Thick clouds swirled around its surface, glowing with strange electrical storms that made the sensors flicker and spark. The continents were covered in deep red vegetation that looked like dried blood from this distance. Jake had studied the geological reports, but seeing it with his own eyes made his chest feel tight. All Crew 2 stations, Commander Zeftar. Voice echoed through the ship's communication system. We begin landing procedures in 30 minutes. Jake gathered his equipment and made his way to the shuttle bay. His gear was simple compared to what the aliens carried. He had basic biological sampling tools, a portable microscope, specimen containers, and his personal tablet loaded with Earth's animal behavioral data. The aliens looked at his small pack and shook their heads. Dr. Velanira was loading crystalline analysis equipment that hummed with energy. Each piece of her gear was worth more than Jake's entire education had cost. She glowed a steady blue color, which meant she was focused and excited about the scientific possibilities ahead. Krelmoth supervised the loading of weapons and defensive equipment. Energy rifles, plasma cannons, portable shield generators, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. His forearms moved quickly and efficiently, checking each item twice. The defensive perimeter will be established within the first hour, he announced to no one in particular. Commander Zephyr wore full combat armor that made him look even larger than usual. The suit was equipped with sensor arrays, communication, gear, and weapon systems that could probably level a small building. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never met a problem that superior firepower could not solve. The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface was rough. Zarian Prime's atmosphere was thick with electromagnetic interference that made their instruments go crazy. Warning lights flashed constantly, and the shuttle's computer kept announcing system malfunctions in a calm voice that did not match the way. The ship was shaking. Jake pressed his face to the window and watched the landscape rush past below. The jungle was even stranger than the reports had described. The trees were massive, some reaching hundreds of feet into the air with trunks as wide as buildings. Their leaves glowed with soft bioluminescent light that pulsed in patterns Jake could not understand. Vines hung between the trees like alien highways, and he could see creatures moving along them in the distance. Electromagnetic interference is getting worse, the pilot announced. I need to set us down before we lose all navigation. They landed in a clearing that looked like it had been created by something very large and very violent. Trees at the edges were broken and twisted, their trunks showing deep claw marks that went right through the bark and into the wood beneath. The clearing was roughly circular, about 200 feet across, with strange burn marks scattered across the ground. Interesting landing site, Jake said as they unloaded their equipment. Commander Zephyr looked around the clearing with his enhanced vision. It was the only open space within 50 kilometers. We make do with what we have. Jake knelt down and examined some of the claw marks on a fallen tree. They were fresh, maybe a few days old. The marks were huge, each one longer than his hand and deep enough to reach his wrist. Whatever had made them was bigger and stronger than anything he had studied on Earth. He pulled out his tablet and took measurements, noting the spacing and depth of each mark. "What are you doing?" Dr. Valeniera asked, her crystalline form flashing orange with curiosity. "These claw marks tell a story," Jake explained. "See how they are angled. The creature that made them was moving fast, probably chasing something. And look at the spacing. These are from the back feet. The front claws would be even bigger." Kralmoth set down a heavy weapons case and looked at the marks Jake was studying. Juvenile Voidstalker, most likely. An adult would have left marks twice that size. Jake felt his blood turn cold. If these were from a juvenile, he did not want to think about what an adult could do. He took more pictures and measurements while the aliens set up their camp. The defensive perimeter went up quickly. Energy shields formed a glowing dome over the clearing, and weapon turrets emerged from the ground at regular intervals. Sensor arrays spread out like mechanical flowers, scanning the jungle for any sign of movement. Within an hour, they had created what looked like a small fortress. "Nothing can get through those shields," Commander Zephyr announced with satisfaction. The Coalition's best defensive technology. Jake was not so sure. He had noticed things while they were setting up camp that the aliens had missed. The jungle was too quiet. On Earth, when predators were near, other animals would either flee or go silent. The normal sounds of forest life would stop. Here on Zarian Prime, Jake could not hear any small creatures moving in the underbrush. No insects buzzing, no birds calling, no rustling of leaves from small animals running around. Commander Jake said, "I think we might have a problem." "Kind of problem?" Zephyr asked, not really paying attention as he checked the shield generators. "The jungle is too quiet. Where I come from, that usually means something big and dangerous is nearby." Dr. Valeniera flashed yellow with amusement. "This is an alien ecosystem, Jake Morrison. You cannot apply Earth animal behavior to creatures that evolved on a completely different world. Predator and prey relationships are universal," Jake replied. "Fear of being eaten is the same everywhere." Kralmoth clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Our sensors would detect anything larger than a small rodent within a 5-kilometer radius. The jungle is quiet because there is nothing here worth worrying about." Jake wanted to argue, but he could see it would be pointless. The aliens trusted their technology more than they trusted his instincts. He went back to setting up his own equipment, trying to ignore the feeling that they were being watched. As the day wore on, Jake continued to notice small details that bothered him. The electromagnetic readings on his tablet kept fluctuating in patterns that seemed almost regular, like a heartbeat. The bioluminescent plants near the edge of the clearing had gone dark, something that should not happen during daylight hours according to the research data. Most disturbing of all, the claw marks he had found were starting to look fresh, as if whatever had made them was still nearby. "I want to take some samples from the forest edge," Jake announced as the sun began to set. "Absolutely not, Commander," Zephyr said immediately. "You stay inside the perimeter. That is an order. I will be just outside the shields for a few minutes. I need to collect plant samples and maybe some soil to understand the local ecosystem." "The local ecosystem can wait," Kralmoth said. "Night is when the dangerous creatures come out to hunt. We'll stay inside where it is safe." Jake looked at the jungle beyond their glowing shields. The trees seemed to press closer in the fading light, and the strange patterns of bioluminescence were starting to appear on leaves and vines. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Fine," Jake said. "But I want to take the first watch tonight." The aliens looked at each other in surprise. Dr. Velanira flashed several colors quickly, which meant she was confused. "That makes no sense," she said. "You have the weakest senses of anyone here. What could you possibly watch for that our sensors cannot detect?" "Sometimes the most important things are the ones that sensors miss," Jake replied. Commander Zephyr considered this for a moment. "It's very well. You can take first watch if it makes you feel useful. But if anything goes wrong, you wake us immediately. Do not try to be a hero." "I understand," Jake said. As darkness fell over Zarian Prime, the jungle came alive with strange lights and sounds. The aliens retired to their sleeping pods, confident that their shields and sensors would protect them through the night. Their technology had never failed them before, and they saw no reason why it should fail them now. Jake sat alone in the center of the camp, watching the jungle and listening to sounds that his human ears could detect, but the alien sensors could not. He had brought his tablet and a cup of coffee from Earth, and he planned to spend the night learning everything he could about this strange new world. What he did not know was that something in the jungle was watching him back, studying his movements, and waiting for the right moment to strike. The Void Stalker had been circling their camp since they landed, invisible to their technology but very interested in these new visitors to its territory. The night was about to become much more dangerous than anyone expected. Jake sat in the center of the camp with his back against a supply crate, watching the jungle around them. The alien crew members had been asleep for 2 hours, and the night was getting stranger by the minute. The bioluminescent plants pulsed, with light in patterns that almost looked like they were trying to communicate with something, his tablet showed. Electromagnetic readings that made no sense. The numbers kept jumping around like something was interfering with the sensors, but the interference came in waves that seemed too regular to be natural. Jake had seen similar patterns when studying electric eels back on Earth, but this was much stronger and more complex. The jungle sounds had changed too. Earlier in the evening, he could hear small creatures moving in the underbrush beyond their shields. Now everything was completely silent except for a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Something was wrong. Every instinct he had developed from years of studying predators was screaming warnings at him. On Earth, when the forest went completely silent like this, it meant only one thing. A major predator was hunting nearby and every other creature was hiding. Jake checked his tablet again. The electromagnetic readings were getting stronger, and now they were coming in a pattern that reminded him of a heartbeat, slow and steady, like something very large breathing. He looked at the defensive systems around the camp. All the lights were green, showing that everything was working normally. But Jake had learned not to trust technology completely. A movement at the edge of the clearing caught his eye. It was just a shadow shifting between the trees. But it was too big to be any of the small creatures they had seen during the day. Jake stood up slowly and walked closer to the shield barrier, trying to get a better look. The shadow moved again, and this time Jake could see that it was definitely something alive. It was hard to make out the exact shape because it seemed to bend and blur at the edges, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. But it was huge, easily 12 feet tall and probably twice as long. Jake's hands started shaking as he realized what he was looking at. The Void Stalker had found them. He grabbed his communicator and was about to wake the others when all the lights in the camp suddenly went out. The shield generators made a sound like breaking glass and then went completely silent. The weapon turrets stopped their slow rotation and hung limp like dead flowers. In the space of 3 seconds, all their advanced technology had become worthless scrap metal. The emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in harsh red light that hurt Jake's eyes. Now he could see the creature clearly, and what he saw made his blood turn to ice. The Void Stalker was even more terrifying than the reports had described. Its body was covered in what looked like black scales, but they shifted and moved like liquid metal. When it turned its head, Jake could see eyes that glowed with their own inner light, like stars burning in the darkness. Its claws were longer than his forearms and looked sharp, enough to cut through the ship's hull. But the most frightening thing about the creature was how it moved. Despite its enormous size, it made no sound as it circled the camp. Its electromagnetic camouflage made it hard to look at directly, like trying to focus on something underwater. One moment it would be on the left side of the clearing, and the next it would appear on the right, as if it could teleport. The sleeping pods began to open as the alien crew members woke up to the emergency alarms. Commander Zefter emerged. First, his combat armor activating with a series of electronic beeps and clicks. But when he tried to access his weapon systems, nothing happened. "What is the status of our defenses?" he shouted at Jake. "Everything is down," Jake replied, never taking his eyes off the creature. "It did something to knock out all our electronics." Dr. Velanira stumbled out of her pod, her crystalline body flashing rapid colors that Jake had never seen before. Fear, he realized. She was more afraid than he had ever seen any of the aliens. "Impossible," she said. "Our systems are hardened against electromagnetic pulse attacks." Kralmoth burst from his sleeping area with weapons in all 4 hands, but when he pulled the triggers, nothing happened. The energy rifles were completely dead. He threw them aside and grabbed a mechanical crossbow from his emergency kit. "Everyone stay together," he ordered. "We make our way to the shuttle." The Void Stalker seemed to understand their plan. It moved to block their path to the landing area, its massive form barely visible in the shifting shadows. Jake could see intelligence in those glowing eyes, a cunning that went far beyond simple animal instinct. This creature was not just hunting them, it was playing with them. "The shuttle systems will be dead too," Jake said quietly. "Whatever it did to our equipment, the range was bigger than just our camp." Commander Zefter's armor was completely dark now, nothing more than heavy metal plates that slowed him down. "Then we fight our way out on foot," he said, pulling out a blade that was as long as Jake's arm. The creature attacked without warning.
Out.
One moment it was at the edge of the clearing, and the next, it was in the middle of their group, moving faster than Jake's eyes could follow. Its first strike knocked Commander Zefter 20 feet across the camp, his armor cracking like an eggshell when he hit a supply crate. Dr. Velanira screamed and tried to run toward the jungle. But the Void Stalker was already there, cutting off her escape. It did not kill her immediately. Instead, it seemed to be herding her back toward the others. Like a cat playing with a mouse, Kralmoth fired his crossbow, and the bolt struck the creature's shoulder. But instead of penetrating, it bounced off the shifting scales like it had hit solid rock. The Void Stalker turned toward him with what might have been amusement in its glowing eyes. Jake found himself backed against a pile of equipment. Watching his crewmates scatter in panic, everything they had trusted, all their advanced weapons and defensive systems, had failed them completely. The creature moved through their camp like it owned the place, systematically destroying anything that might be useful. But as Jake watched the Void Stalker hunt, he began to notice patterns. The creature was incredibly fast and strong, but it moved in predictable ways. When it turned left, it always took 3 steps before changing direction. When it prepared to jump, it lowered its head and shifted its weight to its back legs. It was following instincts that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution. Jake had seen similar behavior in Earth predators, lions, wolves, and sharks. All had their own hunting patterns that could be learned and predicted. The Void Stalker might be an alien creature with abilities that seemed like magic, but at its core, it was still just an animal following its programming. The creature cornered Dr. Velanira against the remains of a shield generator. She was flashing so many colors so quickly that she looked like a broken light display. The Void Stalker raised one massive claw, preparing to end her life. Jake shouted, throwing a rock at the creature's head. The Void Stalker turned toward him, and Jake felt like he was looking into the heart of a black hole. Those glowing eyes fixed on him with an intelligence that was almost human. And Jake realized that the creature was evaluating him as a threat. It must have decided he was not worth worrying about, because it turned back toward Dr. Velanira. But Jake had learned something important in that moment of eye contact. The creature was confident, maybe too confident. It saw the humans and aliens as easy prey that could not possibly hurt it. That confidence might be its weakness. Jake picked up a piece of broken equipment and threw it at the Void Stalker's back legs. This time, the creature spun around completely. Its attention now focused entirely on him. Commander Zefter and Krellmouth were pulling Dr. Velanira to safety, but Jake knew they would not get far. The Void Stalker began moving toward him. Jake felt his heart hammering in his chest. He had no weapons, no armor, and no way to outrun the creature. But he had something that the others did not have. He had spent his entire life studying how predators thought and moved, as the creature closed the distance between them. Jake did something that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of running away, he stood his ground and began to move in a slow circle. Keeping his eyes locked on the Void Stalker's glowing gaze, he was about to test everything he had learned about predator behavior against the most dangerous hunter in the known galaxy. And he was going to do it with nothing but his bare hands and his understanding of how killers think. Jake kept his eyes locked on the Void Stalker as he moved in a slow circle. The creature's glowing eyes followed his movement, but it did not attack immediately. Jake could see confusion in those alien features. Every other prey animal had either run away screaming or frozen in terror. Jake was doing neither.
"What are you doing?"
Commander Zefter called out from where he was helping Dr. Velanira to her feet. "Run, you fool." But Jake did not run. He'd studied enough predators to know that running would trigger the creature's chase instinct. Instead, he kept moving, sideways, never turning his back on the Void Stalker, never making any sudden movements that might cause it to attack. The creature took a step forward, and Jake noticed something important. Its electromagnetic camouflage flickered for just a moment when it moved. There was a tiny delay between when its body shifted position and when the visual distortion caught up. It was like watching a badly synchronized movie where the sound did not match the picture. Jake filed that information away and continued his careful dance around the creature. He was looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that might give him an advantage. The Void Stalker was bigger, faster, and stronger than him in every way. But Jake had one thing it did not have. He understood that this was not just about physical strength. The creature moved again, this time circling to Jake's left. Jake noticed that it always moved counterclockwise when it was deciding how to attack. When it moved clockwise, it was just repositioning, another pattern to remember. Krellmoth was gathering weapons from the scattered equipment, trying to find something that still worked after the electromagnetic pulse. "I have a chemical explosive," he called out. "Get away from it so I can throw this." "No," Jake said firmly, still keeping his eyes on the Void Stalker. "Explosives will just make it angry." This creature survived millions of years of evolution by being smarter than its prey. The Void Stalker seemed to lose patience with Jake's strange behavior. It lowered its head and prepared to charge, just like Jake had seen it do before. But this time, Jake was ready. When the creature lunged forward, Jake did not try to dodge to the side like a normal person would. Instead, he dropped to the ground and rolled directly under the creature's belly. The Void Stalker flew over him and crashed into a pile of equipment behind where Jake had been standing. For a moment, Its electromagnetic camouflage completely failed, and Jake could see its true form clearly. The creature was even more magnificent than he had thought, but he also saw something else. There were pale spots along its throat and behind its front legs, where the scales were thinner. Jake scrambled to his feet as the creature spun around to face him again. Ow! It was really angry. Its eyes blazed brighter, and it made a sound like thunder rolling across the sky. Jake could feel the sound in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Those pale spots, he called out to the others. They're vulnerable points. The scales are thinner there. Kralmoth raised his crossbow and aimed at one of the pale spots. But the creature's camouflage was working again, making it almost impossible to target accurately. The bolt went wide, striking a tree 20 feet away. The Voidstalker charged again, and this time Jake was not fast enough. One of its massive claws caught him across the chest, tearing through his shirt and leaving 3 deep scratches in his skin. The force of the blow threw him backward, and he hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of his lungs. Jake rolled to the side. Just as the creature's jaws snapped shut where his head had been a second before, he could smell the creature's breath, hot and metallic like burning copper. His chest was on fire where the claws had hit him, and he could feel blood running down his ribs. The creature pressed its attack, trying to pin Jake to the ground with its massive weight. Jake grabbed a broken piece of metal from the scattered equipment and swung it at the creature's face. The improvised weapon bounced off its scales without doing any damage, but it distracted the Voidstalker long enough for Jake to roll away. Dr. Valenira was flashing every color Jake had ever seen, and some he had not. "This is impossible," she said. "The human should be dead already." But Jake was not dead, and he was learning more about the creature with every exchange. The Voidstalker was incredibly powerful, but it was used to prey that either ran away or fought in predictable ways. Jake's erratic movements and refusal to follow normal prey behavior was confusing it. The creature backed up and began to circle again, this time moving clockwise. Jake knew what that meant. It was repositioning for another attack, but it was also thinking this was not going the way the Voidstalker had expected. Jake used the brief pause to grab a handful of dirt and broken glass from the ground. When the creature charged again, he threw the mixture directly at its glowing eyes. The Voidstalker flinched and shook its head, momentarily blinded. Jake did not waste the opportunity. He ran straight at the creature and jumped, grabbing onto the thick scales along its neck. The Voidstalker reared up on its back legs, trying to shake him off, but Jake held on with both hands. From this close, Jake could see details that no one had ever observed before. The creature's electromagnetic organs were located just behind its skull, protected by thick bone, but connected to the surface by small nerve clusters. If he could disrupt those connections, he might be able to interfere with its camouflage. The Voidstalker slammed itself against a tree, trying to crush Jake against the trunk. Jake let go at the last second and dropped to the ground, but not before he had pressed his fingers against one of the nerve clusters. The creature's camouflage flickered wildly for several seconds. Now Jake was behind the creature, and it had to turn around to face him, but the Voidstalker was getting tired. Its movements were slightly slower than before, and its breathing was heavier. Jake might be losing blood from his wounds, but the creature was burning through its energy reserves trying to catch him. "Commander," Zephyr had managed to get his armor's emergency systems working. "I have emergency power," he announced. One shot from the backup weapon. "Wait," Jake called out. "I need to get it in the right position first." Jake began backing toward a pile of equipment that had sharp metal edges sticking out at dangerous angles. The Voidstalker followed him, its attention completely focused on this strange little prey that refused to die easily. When Jake was exactly where he wanted to be, he stopped moving and stood perfectly still. The creature saw its chance and lunged forward with its jaws wide open, intending to end the fight once and for all. But Jake had been counting on that reaction. At the last possible second, he dropped flat to the ground. The Voidstalker's momentum carried it forward, and it slammed chest first into the sharp metal debris behind. Jake, the creature roared in pain as the metal punched through the thin scales at the vulnerable spots Jake had identified. Dark blood began flowing from the wounds, and its electromagnetic camouflage started failing completely. Now, Jake shouted. Commander Zefter fired his backup weapon, and the energy bolt struck the wounded creature's center mass. The Void Stalker staggered backward, seriously injured for the first time in its life, but it was not dead yet. The creature turned toward Jake with murder in its glowing eyes. It was hurt and angry, and it wanted revenge against the small human who had caused it so much trouble. Jake stood up slowly, his chest bleeding and his hands shaking from exhaustion. He had no more tricks, no more plans. The next few seconds would determine whether he lived or died. The Void Stalker gathered itself for one final attack, and Jake prepared to meet it with nothing but his bare hands and his refusal to give up. The Void Stalker charged at Jake with all the fury of a dying god. Its wounded body moved slower than before, but it was still faster than any human had a right to survive. Jake could see his death coming in those blazing eyes, but he did not run. He had nowhere left to go. At the last second, Jake did something that surprised even himself. Instead of trying to dodge away, he stepped forward to meet the creature head-on. The Void Stalker's massive jaws opened wide enough to swallow Jake's entire head. But Jake ducked low and drove his shoulder into the creature's wounded chest. The impact sent waves of pain through Jake's already injured body, but it also drove the metal debris deeper into the Void Stalker's wounds. The creature roared and tried to bring its claws down on Jake's back, but Jake was already moving. He wrapped his arms around the creature's thick neck and held on. The Void Stalker tried to shake him off, slamming itself against trees and rolling. On the ground, Jake's world became a blur of pain and motion, but he refused to let go. He had studied enough anatomy to know where the major blood vessels and nerve clusters were located, even on an alien creature. If he could just reach the right spot. Blood from Jake's chest wound was making his hands slippery, and his strength was fading fast. The creature bucked like an angry horse, trying to throw him off. Jake's ribs felt like they were on fire, and he could taste blood in his mouth. But he held on. During one particularly violent shake, Jake managed to get his hands positioned exactly where he wanted them. The Void Stalker's neck was as thick as a tree trunk, but Jake had found the spot where he could feel the creature's pulse beating beneath its scales. He pressed his thumbs against the nerve cluster he had located, applying pressure the way he had learned in his biology classes. The creature's movements began to slow. Its electromagnetic camouflage flickered and died completely. The glowing eyes that had seemed so terrifying began to dim. Jake increased the pressure, cutting off the blood flow to the creature's brain. The Void Stalker tried one last desperate attack, rolling onto its back to crush Jake beneath its weight. Jake felt something crack in his left arm, but he did not let go. He held on with everything he had left, pressing harder against the nerve cluster. Slowly, impossibly, the mighty Void Stalker began to weaken. Its struggles became less violent, then stopped altogether. The creature that had killed trained warriors and terrorized an entire planet died quietly in Jake's arms, its glowing eyes finally going dark. Jake lay there for a long moment, not quite believing what had happened. The Void Stalker's massive body was still warm against his chest, but it was definitely dead. He had done it. Somehow, a weak human, with no weapons and no armor, had killed the most dangerous predator in known space. Jake. Dr. Velanira's voice sounded like she was speaking from very far away. Jake, are you alive? Jake tried to answer, but all that came out was a weak cough. His vision was getting blurry, and he could not feel his left arm at all. The adrenaline that had kept him going during the fight was wearing off, and his body was starting to shut down. Commander Zefter appeared above him, his damaged armor making mechanical noises as he knelt down. Do not move, he said. You have serious injuries. Is it dead? Jake managed to whisper. The commander looked at the massive creature lying motionless beside Jake. Yes, he said quietly. It is dead. You killed it. Kralmoth was running a medical scanner over Jake's body, his forearms working quickly too. Assess the damage. Multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding, broken ribs, and a fractured arm, he reported. But he will live. Jake tried to sit up, but gentle hands pushed him back down. How? He asked. How did I kill something like that? Dr. Velanira was examining the Voidstalker's body with her analytical equipment. Her crystalline form was flashing, colors that Jake had never seen before. Wonder, he realized. She was completely amazed by what she was seeing. You applied pressure to the creature's carotid artery, she explained, her voice full of disbelief. You cut off the blood supply to its brain until it lost consciousness and died, but that should have been impossible. The creature's neck muscles alone should have been strong enough to break your arms. Leverage, Jake said weakly. Its own weight against it. When it tried to shake me off, it created the pressure I needed. Commander Zefter was studying the claw marks on Jake's chest. You should have died in the first 30 seconds, he said. What did you survive long enough to get close to it?
Ow.
Jake closed his eyes and tried to organize his thoughts. The pain. Medication that Kralmoth had given him was making everything feel distant and strange. I watched how it moved, he said. Every predator has patterns, they cannot help it. Evolution programs them to hunt in certain ways. But this was an alien. Creature, Dr. Velanira protested. Nothing like anything on your world. Predators are the same everywhere, Jake replied. They all think they are the strongest thing around. That makes them confident. Maybe too confident. When prey acts differently than expected, it confuses. Them Krelmoth was applying bandages to Jake's wounds with surprising gentleness. You used its own instincts against it, he said, like turning its strength into weakness. Something like that, Jake agreed. It took 6 hours to get Jake stable enough to move back to the shuttle. The Voidstalker's electromagnetic pulse had worn off, and their equipment was slowly coming back online. Commander Zeftor insisted on taking detailed scans of both Jake and the dead creature before they left the planet. The flight back to the horizon's edge was quiet. Jake slept most of the way, exhausted by his injuries and the medication. When he woke up, he found the alien crew members looking at him with expressions he had never seen before. Respect. The news of what had happened spread through the ship, faster than Jake had thought possible. Within hours, every crew member on board had heard the story of how the weak human had killed a Voidstalker with his bare hands. Some of them came to his medical bay just to see him with their own eyes. Dr. Velanira visited him every day while he recovered. She had written a complete report about the incident, but she said the Coalition Science Council did not believe it. They think I made a mistake in my observations, she told him. They say it is impossible for a human to kill a Voidstalker without weapons. Do you believe it? Jake asked. Her crystalline form flashed a steady blue color. I saw it with my own eyes. I scanned your body afterward. You had no hidden weapons, no genetic modifications, no technological assistance. You killed that creature with nothing but your knowledge and your refusal to give up. When they returned to Coalition space, Jake found himself something of a celebrity. Scientists and military officers came from across the galaxy to interview him. They wanted to understand how he had done what their best warriors could not do. Jake tried to explain about predator behavior and the importance of understanding your enemy, but most of them did not really listen. They wanted to believe that humans had some secret weapon or hidden strength that they could copy and use themselves. The truth was simpler and more complicated than that. Humans were not stronger or faster or smarter than other species. Had evolved on a world full of dangerous creatures, and they had learned to survive by being adaptable and creative. They had learned that sometimes the best way to win a fight was not to fight at all, but to make the enemy defeat itself. Jake returned to Earth 6 months later, but he was not the same person who had left. The scars on his chest had healed, but the experience had changed him. He had faced the most dangerous predator in the galaxy and won not through strength or technology, but through understanding and determination. The phrase, never corner. Human became popular throughout Coalition space. It meant that even the weakest-looking opponent might have hidden strengths that could surprise you. Jake liked that saying. It reminded everyone that strength came in many different forms, and that sometimes the smallest person in the room might be the most dangerous one of all.